You bet.
And joining me now, the man of the hour on a very distant connection, The Guardian's Glenn Greenwald. And Glenn, I mentioned it's a distant connection because we're going to have a real satellite delay in our conversation. Pete Williams just referred to the possibility of investigations. Senator Dianne Feinstein said today she believes that this leak, the first leak we're talking about, the Verizon phone calls leak, should be investigated. And it's pretty clear that that investigation would have to include you.
Look, let them go and investigate. There's this document called the Constitution, and one of the things that it guarantees is the right of a free press, which means that as a citizen and as a journalist, I have the absolute constitutional right to go and report on what it is that my government is doing in the dark and inform my fellow citizens about that action. There is this massive surveillance state that the United States government has built up that has extraordinary implications for how we live as human beings on the earth and as Americans in our country, and we have the right to know what it is that government and that agency is doing, and I intend to continue to shine light on that, and Dianne Feinstein can beat her chest all she wants and call for investigations, and none of that's going to stop and none of it's going to change.
Glenn, I want you to listen to what Lindsey Graham had to say today about the Verizon phone calls part of what you've been revealing. Let's listen to this.
I'm a Verizon customer. It doesn't bother me one bit for the National Security Administration to have my phone number, because what they're trying to do is find out what terrorist groups we know about and individuals and who the hell are calling. And if my number pops up on some terrorist phone, I'm confident that the FISA court is not going to allow my phone calls to be monitored by my government.
Now, Glenn, he went a little haywire there at the end, because if his number pops up on a terrorist's phone, he is going to be investigated. That's exactly what they say the point of the program is. But the first part of what he was saying, I think he may be speaking for a lot of Americans who say, I mean, I'm holding my Verizon phone in my hand, and I think I've heard a lot of people today say, I don't care that they're collecting all of the phone calls I make. The phone company's connecting all that information anyway.
Well, I mean, I think it's notable that one of the most right-wing members of the United States Congress is stepping up to be the most vocal defender of what the Obama administration is doing and what the Bush administration did before that, because it's a very right-wing mentality. The idea is that the government should simply know everything that citizens in a free society are doing, regardless of whether there's evidence that we've committed any crimes. Well, there was a huge investigation in the 1970s called the Church Committee, and what it discovered was that whenever surveillance powers are exercised in the dark, the government lies about the reasons that they're surveilling, and they abuse that power. They eavesdropped on all sorts of political leaders like Martin Luther King and dissidents and opponents of the administration. And the idea that if you have nothing to hide, then there's no reason you should care, people know instinctively that's false. They put passwords on their emails. They put locks on their bedroom doors. There's all kinds of value that we have in having privacy as individuals that is destroyed when we allow the government to monitor and store everything that we're doing. But of course, the Lindsey Grahams of the world are thrilled with that, because that's the mentality in which this is all rooted.
Glenn, you broke last night's story through the British newspaper, The Guardian. Tonight's story, you're breaking, teaming up with the Washington Post. Tell us about these new developments tonight and what the capacity is for the government to collect information from Google and Apple and Facebook.
Well, in 2008, the United States Congress, on a bipartisan basis, created a new spying law called the FISA Amendments Act. And what it did was it eliminated the warrant requirement for the U.S. government to eavesdrop on all conversations except ones between Americans domestically. When an American talks to American, you still need a warrant, but otherwise, if an American talks to somebody outside the U.S., they don't. And what this program does, and that law was renewed in 2012, what this program does is that when that law was passed, people said, well, how are we going to prevent abuse if the government doesn't have to go to a court and get a warrant? How do we prevent abuse? And the answer was, don't worry, they still have to go to the internet companies and they still have to go to the phone companies and ask for the records they want, and that will be a check on abuse. use. And this program is a program in which the NSA takes its hands and sticks it directly into the servers of all of these internet giants, Facebook, Google, Skype, Apple, YouTube, that people around the world use to have communications, and lets the NSA grab whatever it is they want, either stored emails or real-time communication, with nobody looking over their shoulder, nobody watching what they're doing. Any analyst in the NSA sitting at a keyboard can at any moment go into the system and listen to whatever he wants, read whatever he wants, and then store it. It is extremely menacing, and there are no checks. This is how the world communicates, and the NSA is monitoring it at all times.
Glenn Greenwald, thank you very much for joining us on this night where you're breaking this major news. Thank you very much, Glenn.